All right, let's set the scene. It's August 1914. The world has just plunged into the Great War. And for the British Army, this is the moment of truth. This is their first big fight in Europe in almost 60 years. They're in this little Belgian mining town, Mons, and they are standing in the path of the entire German war machine.
But here's where things get interesting. That quote, it's from a German officer whose army won the battle. Yeah, you heard that right. The Germans took the ground, the British fell back. So how on earth could the winners feel like they'd been badly beaten? That's the paradox, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
So to really get what happened at Mons, you gotta understand the German master plan, the famous Schlieffen Plan. They thought they could win the whole war in a few weeks with this enormous right hook, swinging their most powerful armies right through neutral Belgium, then down to wrap around and just smash the French forces. It was all about speed and pure, overwhelming power. And guess who marched right into the path of that giant hook? The British Expeditionary Force, the BEF. They were a tiny army by comparison, and they ended up on the far left flank of the Allied line. This meant they were staring right down the barrel of the German First Army, the absolute tip of the spear of the entire German invasion. They had literally no idea what was about to hit them. I mean, just look at the matchup. It was a total David versus Goliath situation. The BEF was this small, tight, professional force of about 80,000 volunteers. But their superpower? They were expert marksmen. We're talking about the average soldier being able to fire 15 aimed rounds a minute and hit a target 300 yards away. That's practically a human machine gun. The Germans, on the other hand, just had bodies. Tons of them, in a whole lot of artillery. And let's put a hard number on that. At Mons, the Germans outnumbered the British by about 3-1. So just picture it. For every single British soldier getting into position along this quiet canal in Belgium, there are 3 German soldiers marching right at him. The odds were just staggering. So, what was the plan for the British? Well, it was simple, but that doesn't mean it was easy. Their job was to protect the flank of the much larger French army, which was fighting its own desperate battle nearby. The order was to hold the line of the Mons-Condé Canal for just 24 hours. That's it. Just hold on for one day. And the battle kicked off at dawn on August 23rd. The German artillery started pounding the British lines, and by 9 a.m., the first waves of German infantry were attacking the canal bridges. The fighting was fiercest around this awkward loop in the canal called the salient, and the fight for those bridges, well, that became the story of the entire day. Now, the Germans expected to just roll over the British. They advanced in these dense, packed columns, almost like they were on a parade ground, and they walked into an absolute storm of lead. The British rifle fire was so fast and so deadly that the Germans were convinced they were up against dozens and dozens of machine guns. But they weren't. It was just the incredible, disciplined training of the British infantrymen. And the bravery on display was just off the charts. Take the story of the Nimy Bridge. Lieutenant Maurice Deese was on a machine gun. His whole crew gets knocked out, and he's wounded 5 times, but he keeps firing until he's killed. Then, Private Sidney Godley takes his place, keeps the gun going to cover his friends as they retreat, and then, before he's captured, he takes the gun apart so the enemy can't use it. Just unbelievable. They both received the Victoria Cross, the very first 2 of the entire war. Now, by the afternoon, even with all that heroism, the sheer number of German soldiers was starting to overwhelm the British positions. The order came to pull back. But here's the key thing. This wasn't a rout. They weren't broken and running for their lives. So what made them pull back?
Well, the decision wasn't actually made at Mons. It came from their right flank. The huge French army that the British were there to protect had been beaten in their own battle and were in full retreat. All of a sudden, the BF's flank was completely open, just hanging in the wind. If they stayed put, they'd be surrounded and annihilated. They had absolutely no choice. They had to get out of there.
And this kicked off one of the most incredible episodes of the war. We're not talking about falling back a few miles. This was the start of the legendary Great Retreat, a brutal 2-week, 250-mile fighting withdrawal, with the Germans snapping at their heels every single step of the way, all the way back to the very edge of Paris. So this brings us right back to that central puzzle. The British gave up the battlefield. They retreated. By any normal definition, that's a tactical defeat. So, how in the world do we look at Mons and see anything that looks like a victory? It all comes down to the difference between tactics and strategy. See, tactically, they retreated. They gave up the ground. That's a loss. But strategically, it's about the bigger picture. Did that action even in defeat, helped the overall war effort. The British may have lost the battle for a canal, but what they won strategically was so much more important.
And you can see that impact right here in the numbers. Even though they were outnumbered 3-1 and forced to retreat, the British dished out way more punishment than they took. They lost about 1,600 men. German losses? Estimates put them as high as 5,000. The BEF made the German First Army pay in blood for every single inch of ground they took.
And that's the real legacy of Mons. That 24-hour mission to hold the line turned into a 48-hour street fight that completely threw a wrench in the Germans' rigid invasion timetable. That delay helped buy the Allies precious time, and it contributed to what would later be called the Miracle of the Marne, the battle that saved Paris. Back home, it was a massive morale boost. It proved their contemptible little army could stand up to the German giant. And it gave birth to legends, the proud nickname, the Old Contemptibles, and even the myth of the Angels of Mons.
So, in the end, the story of Mons teaches us that the result of a battle isn't just about who's standing on the field when the shooting stops. It's about courage, it's about strategy, and it's about the power of the story that gets told afterward. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of history is shaped not by what actually happened, but by the legend that it becomes.